There are seasons in life when it feels as though you are ascending a mountain entirely obscured by fog. No one beside you, no one offering encouragement, no one bearing witness to the effort you are quietly and persistently pouring into each step forward. You keep moving. You keep honoring the promises you have made to yourself in the stillness of your own interior. And yet the world outside remains hauntingly, almost unbearably silent. No one says, "I am proud of you." No one acknowledges the battles you have been fighting without an audience. And in those moments of profound solitude, you find yourself asking a question that cuts to the very core of your motivation. Does any of this matter when no one is watching? But it is precisely within that solitude, that quiet, demanding, and ultimately sacred space, that another kind of strength begins to take shape. A strength that does not require applause or external confirmation to sustain itself. Carl Jung once observed that every genuine rebirth begins with dissolution. When there is no one left to lean on, that is not the end of something. It is a signal, a clear and unmistakable signal that your soul is preparing to enter a new stage of development, a stage in which you become, perhaps for the very first time, your own authentic source of power. In what follows, we will walk together through that journey. The 7 essential steps to rise and advance even when no one stands beside you. Because it is precisely in the moment you stop waiting for someone else to lift you that you encounter a truth so profound it reorganizes everything. Everything you have ever sought in the external world, strength, love, peace, genuine belonging, has always resided within you, waiting with patient certainty to be awakened. And when that awakening occurs, you do not merely rise, you begin to move through the world carried by your own light. The first step is learning to understand loneliness as what it truly is, the silent teacher of genuine strength. There are stretches in life when the world seems to quietly withdraw from around you. Conversations that once felt comfortable and engaging no longer hold your attention. People who once walked beside you begin to feel distant in ways that are difficult to articulate. On the surface, everything appears to remain the same. Your responsibilities, your relationships, the daily rhythms of your existence. And yet something within you knows with absolute certainty that a fundamental shift is occurring. No one names this as the beginning of growth because most people are deeply afraid of this particular passage. But for Carl Jung, this interior withdrawal is the first unmistakable sign of what he called the night sea journey, the dark night of the soul, the necessary descent that precedes every genuine ascent. When you can no longer resonate with the old world you inhabited, and the new one has not yet fully materialized, you must pass through the deepest territory of your own shadow. And that territory is loneliness. But the loneliness Jung described is not simply the experience of being physically alone in a quiet room. It is the profound and disorienting feeling of being disconnected from everything that once made you feel as though you belonged. You still smile in the right moments. You still participate in conversations. But something in your interior knows that what is unfolding around you is no longer reaching your soul. The world appears to be speaking in a language you have somehow forgotten how to understand, and you are left with only the company of yourself. Many people interpret this experience as evidence that something has gone wrong, that they have somehow failed or lost their direction. But in truth, this is the precise moment when the soul begins its deliberate separation from the persona, that carefully constructed mask that once helped you navigate the expectations of the external world, and find your place within it. The feeling that no one truly understands you is not a sign that you have lost your way. It is confirmation that you are drawing closer to your actual self. Jung held with unwavering conviction that a person only genuinely matures when they find the courage to face themselves honestly in solitude. Not when someone else is present to listen and reflect, but when every external voice goes quiet and you are finally compelled to hear the voice that has been speaking within you all along. During this stage, many people lose their footing and retreat into work, into new relationships, into any distraction available that promises relief from the emptiness. But the more consistently they avoid it, the larger and more demanding that emptiness becomes. Loneliness does not arrive to punish you or to signal that you have been abandoned by life. It arrives to deepen you, to guide you toward rebuilding your foundation from the inside rather than continuing to borrow stability from the outside. Your greatest and most beautiful journey is the one that leads you back to yourself. Subscribe to Carl Jung philosophy and hit the like button, and let's walk that path together. There was a woman who, following a painful divorce, found herself in a state of profound disorientation. She had spent most of her adult life surrounded by warmth, noise, and social connection. But when everything familiar collapsed, her apartment became a place of frightening quiet. Rather than rushing to fill that quiet with dates or work or constant distraction, she made the difficult and courageous choice to simply sit with the silence. At first for only a few minutes at a time, then gradually for longer stretches. She cooked for herself. She read. She journaled. She allowed herself to encounter the questions she had spent years carefully avoiding. And months later, she said something that has stayed with me since. She said that she had finally understood silence was not her enemy. It was the place where she could, at last, actually hear herself. That was what Jung called the meeting with the self. The moment you stop running and begin, for the first time, to genuinely come home. When there is no one available to depend on, that absence creates a particular kind of pressure. And that pressure, difficult as it feels in the living of it, forces you to cultivate the discipline and interior steadiness that no external support could ever have developed within you. Like a climber who has no safety rope, every step becomes a fully conscious and deliberate choice. Every action becomes a genuine promise to yourself, and each promise you honor adds another layer to the foundation of strength you are quietly and irreversibly constructing. Loneliness does not arrive to make you fragile. It arrives to make you unshakable. It is the place where your essential nature is tested and refined until it becomes something that circumstances cannot easily move. Looking back from a position of greater perspective, you will recognize that the quietest months of your life were among the moments of your most genuine strength. The image I return to again and again is that of an oak tree in winter. When every surrounding tree has shed its leaves and withdrawn its color, the oak stands alone against the cold wind. No flowers, no visible signs of flourishing. But beneath the surface, during that winter season, its roots are extending deeper into the earth, preparing with extraordinary patience for the spring that is already on its way. Human beings follow precisely the same pattern. Every lonely season is the soul's winter. But if you are patient and honest enough to remain within it rather than flee, you will discover that spring is always waiting on the other side. Jung once wrote that in all chaos there is a cosmos, and in all disorder a secret order. If you are standing in the darkness of your own loneliness right now, understand that this is not evidence of weakness. It is proof that you are leaving behind a path that is finished serving you, in order to open one that is genuinely yours. Because the soul, in order to be reborn, must first dissolve, and only when the world grows silent can you hear the voice within you finally whisper, "It is time to rise." The second step is learning to stop seeking emotional comfort from others. At some point, after you have begun to find your footing in solitude, you arrive at a recognition that is both uncomfortable and profoundly liberating. What truly exhausts us is not the experience of being alone. It is the persistent expectation that someone else should fill that aloneness for us. Carl Jung once observed that loneliness does not arise from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that matter most to you. When you have constructed your emotional stability on the foundation of another person's responses, their attention, their availability, their approval, then every silence, every withdrawal, every unanswered message feels like a collapse of something essential within you. That is not love in its mature form. That is emotional dependency. And Jung recognized it as one of the clearest signs of an ego that has not yet been genuinely integrated. After passing through the stage of learning to stand alone, the next essential lesson is discovering how to genuinely soothe yourself. When you stop reaching outside yourself for reassurance and validation, when you stop measuring your worth against the thermometer of other people's reactions, that is the moment when the deeper self begins to take the lead. There was a woman in a group therapy setting who described something that will likely feel familiar to many people. She said that she came close to genuine panic whenever her partner did not respond to her messages promptly. She would check her phone repeatedly, her imagination constructing increasingly alarming explanations for the silence. She acknowledged that she understood the irrationality of her response, but she said that when he went quiet, she felt as though she herself ceased to exist. After an extended period of honest therapeutic work, she came to understand that the fear had nothing to do with him and everything to do with her earliest experiences. As a child, whenever she expressed sadness or distress, the adults around her either dismissed her feelings as dramatic or simply withdrew from the room. Her unconscious drew the only conclusion available to it from those repeated experiences: that her emotions were not valid, that her inner world did not matter, that she required someone else's attention in order to confirm that she was real. Jung described this dynamic with characteristic precision. He called it the trap of emotional projection. When we use other people as mirrors to determine our own worth, feeling valuable when they engage with us, and losing our sense of direction when they withdraw, we are outsourcing the most fundamental aspect of our psychological life to forces entirely outside our control. And the painful truth is that no one can function as your rescuer indefinitely. The more thoroughly you depend on others for your interior stability, the more completely you lose them. Capacity to regulate yourself. The architecture of your emotional life becomes entirely contingent on the behavior of people who have their own wounds, their own distractions, their own limitations. Learning to self-soothe is not about cultivating coldness or emotional distance. It is not about becoming someone who does not need connection or who is indifferent to the warmth of genuine relationship. It is about becoming the first and most reliable person who listens to your own emotional experience. When grief or fear or loneliness arises within you, rather than immediately reaching for someone to absorb it and make it manageable, you learn to stay present with it. You place your attention on what you are actually feeling. You remain with yourself through the discomfort, rather than abandoning yourself in the rush to find relief. That simple act, that willingness to stay, is the beginning of genuine emotional independence. And in Jung's framework, it represents one of the most significant thresholds of the individuation process. The moment when you stop merging your identity with the collective and begin the work of becoming a genuinely autonomous self. A person who has developed the capacity to comfort themselves does not require constant responses from others in order to feel that they have value. They do not need immediate replies or regular compliments to maintain their forward momentum. They can sit quietly in an ordinary moment, a cup of coffee, an afternoon alone, a walk without destination, and feel genuinely complete within that simplicity. That is not emotional poverty. That is among the highest expressions of interior freedom. Freedom from the compulsion to be continuously validated. Jung described all forms of excessive dependence as the shadow of love. We name it connection or attachment, but at its root, it is most often the fear of abandonment. The fear that if we are left alone with ourselves, what we discover there will not be sufficient. But when you look honestly and directly into that fear, when you stop avoiding it and actually examine what lives inside it, you discover something unexpected. It is not emptiness that you find. It is an invitation. An invitation to become, for yourself, the kind of patient and unconditional presence you needed in childhood, but did not consistently receive. To offer yourself the understanding and the steadiness that you spent years searching for in other people. And then you realize, with the particular quality of recognition that only comes from direct interior experience, that what you believed you needed someone else to provide, you have always possessed the capacity to give yourself. In contemporary psychological terms, this is what emotional independence describes. It is not the rejection of love or the withdrawal from genuine human connection. It is the refusal to surrender control of your interior life to anyone else's choices or moods. You continue to love. You continue to invest in relationships and to value the people who matter to you. But you no longer lose yourself when those relationships shift or when people move in and out of your life. When someone withdraws, you feel the impact, but you do not dissolve. When someone departs, you grieve honestly, but you do not collapse. The foundation beneath you remains intact because it is yours. It was constructed through your own interior work, and it cannot be taken from you by anyone else's choices. Someone who has genuinely cultivated emotional independence does not require a rescuer. They have learned to stand themselves upright, to acknowledge their own pain without dramatizing it, and to continue walking even when they are tired and even when no one is watching them walk. And from that position of grounded self-sufficiency, something remarkable becomes possible that was never available from within the dependency. The capacity to love others not from need or from the fear of what their absence would mean, but from genuine and freely chosen fullness. Not because you require something from them, but because their presence adds something real to a life that is already, at its foundation, whole. Perhaps this is what Jung was reaching toward when he said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Because when you cease depending on others to make you feel adequate and begin discovering your own interior authority, when you stop borrowing your sense of worth from other people's perceptions and start generating it from within, you are no longer performing a version of yourself designed to secure approval. You are simply, quietly, and with increasing confidence, becoming yourself. And if you find yourself in this stage right now, in the difficult and often isolating passage of learning to stand without the support of someone else's constant presence, understand that this is not abandonment. This is not proof that you are unworthy of care. It is simply the moment when the most important work of your interior life is asking you to begin. The third step is learning to stop complaining and understanding why the habit of complaint is one of the most quietly destructive forces available to the human ego. Complaining is the mechanism through which the ego keeps you anchored in your comfort zone. It is the psychological position from which you get to experience yourself as the victim of your circumstances, the one to whom things happen, rather than the one who consciously chooses how to respond to what happens. And the particular cruelty of this position is that it feels, while you are inhabiting it, like a form of action, like you are doing something with your pain by giving it language and an audience. But in reality, every time you articulate a complaint without following it with a conscious choice, you are reinforcing the belief that you are fundamentally powerless. You are sending a message to your own unconscious: I have no genuine strength here. And the unconscious, as Jung consistently observed, takes those messages seriously and organizes your experience accordingly. Jung named this dynamic the shadow of self-pity. When you are trapped within it, you cease acting and begin repeating, cycling through the same question with the same exhausted energy. Why is this happening to me? As though the universe owes you a satisfying explanation before you are permitted to move forward. As though suffering is a personal affront rather than a universal condition that every human being navigates in their own way. But the most transformative question available to you in any moment of genuine difficulty is not, "Why me?" It is, "What can I honestly do with this?" And the moment you make that shift, the moment you redirect the energy that was feeding your complaint towards something constructive, however small, the psychic energy that was locked in that complaint begins to move again. The paralysis begins to dissolve. Complaining is a sophisticated habit of the mind because it creates the convincing illusion of engagement, while actually producing stagnation. When you are investing energy in explaining why your circumstances are unjust, or in rehearsing the ways in which others have failed you, you are not transforming anything. You are simply staying in place while generating the feeling of motion. Every complaint is, at its core, a form of delayed action, a way of remaining in the story of what happened, rather than moving into the territory of what is possible from here. Others may genuinely hurt you. Circumstances may genuinely be unfair. But only you can determine whether what happened becomes a chain that holds you in place or a lesson that propels you forward. Consider the image of a stone resting at the bottom of a river. The current is powerful. It grinds against the stone continuously. It crashes and it carries, and it seems, from the outside, entirely destructive. But over time, through that very process that appears so relentless and so indifferent, stone is polished. What was rough and irregular becomes smooth and luminous. Life operates according to the same principle. It does not pause to accommodate your complaints. It keeps moving. It keeps testing. It keeps applying pressure. But if you endure the current rather than exhausting yourself cursing it, you will emerge from the process stronger, clearer, and more genuinely refined than you were before you entered it. The victim ego, that part of the psyche that gravitates toward complaint and self-pity, loves the sensation of being wronged because as long as you occupy the position of victim, you are technically exempt from the responsibility of change. Someone else caused this. Someone else must fix it. And that exemption, comfortable as it feels in the short term, is also the most reliable path to remaining permanently stuck. Every time you choose to stop complaining and take even a modest action instead, you reclaim the energy that was being consumed by your unconscious patterns. You rise, not because someone arrives to push you, but because you make the quiet and powerful decision that you will no longer remain in the dark voluntarily. There was a woman who, after a deep and painful betrayal by people she had trusted completely, spent the better part of 6 months submerged in bitterness. She described telling the story to anyone who would listen, rehearsing the details of what had been done to her, elaborating on the injustice of it, seeking the confirmation that her pain was as significant as it felt. But she arrived at a moment of genuine clarity one night when she asked herself an honest question. If there were no one available to hear this story, would I still be telling it? The answer that came back was no, and something shifted in that recognition. The following day, she opened a journal, not to record her grievances, but to write about what she wanted to learn, to create, to become from this point forward. She said later that it was not the betrayal itself that had caused the deepest damage. It was the story she had chosen to keep alive for far longer than it deserved. Choosing to stop complaining does not require you to deny the reality of your pain. It does not ask you to pretend that what happened was acceptable or that the grief is not genuine. You are permitted to feel sadness and disappointment and loss in their full depth. But there is a profound difference between feeling your pain and inhabiting it as a permanent identity. Between acknowledging what you have lost and constructing your entire ongoing experience around the retelling of that loss. The energy you currently direct toward complaint is not wasted energy. It is misdirected energy. And the moment you redirect it toward even the smallest constructive action, you begin reclaiming the authorship of your own life. The fourth step involves something that the external world makes extraordinarily difficult: learning to become your own primary source of validation. After you have stopped complaining and begun to take genuine action, a deeper and more subtle test presents itself: the silence of being unseen. You stand up, you do the work, you give your best effort consistently and without reservation. And yet, no one praises you. No one acknowledges the progress you are making. No one appears to notice. This is the precise point where the vast majority of people abandon the path. Not because the work is too demanding, but because invisibility feels unbearable. Because the absence of recognition triggers a doubt so fundamental it shakes the entire foundation of motivation. But it is exactly here, in this moment of no recognition, no applause, no external confirmation, that something of extraordinary value is being forged within you. Carl Jung understood this with characteristic depth. He observed that the most terrifying thing available to a human being is the complete acceptance of oneself. Because when you genuinely validate yourself, when you become your own witness and your own source of worth, you surrender the last hiding place. You can no longer conceal yourself behind the opinions of others, whether those opinions are flattering or critical. You stand fully in your own presence, with complete awareness of both your capacities and your limitations, and you choose to honor what you find there, regardless of whether the world is watching. Think of the story of Cassandra from Greek mythology, the woman granted the gift of genuine prophecy by Apollo, and simultaneously cursed so that no one would believe what she saw. She perceived the truth with clarity and consistency. She witnessed disasters before they arrived and spoke of them with conviction. And yet every person around her turned away, dismissing what she offered as the ravings of someone who had lost their hold on reality. And yet, even in that complete and sustained invisibility, Cassandra did not fall silent. She remained loyal to what she perceived. She continued to honor her truth, even when the world refused to receive it. At a deeper level, her story is a portrait of every soul that has chosen to continue honoring its own vision in silence, even when, and especially when, the world declines to validate that vision. There was a woman who had dedicated years of genuine effort to her professional responsibilities, consistently among the last to leave, consistently among the most thorough in everything she produced. And yet, when the moment of recognition arrived, when the acknowledgments were distributed and the contributions celebrated, her name was absent. Someone else received the praise that her work had quietly made possible. She described the experience with a specific and painful word: invisible. And for a time, that invisibility felt like a verdict, like confirmation that her effort had no genuine value because it had not been officially witnessed and named. But something shifted within her. She made a decision, quiet and without announcement, to stop working in order to be seen, and to begin working in order to see herself clearly. She developed a private practice. Each time she completed something she had invested genuine care in, she wrote down what she had done well, not for an audience, not for a record that anyone else would read, but as an honest act of interior acknowledgement. She rewarded herself with small and deliberate pleasures: an unhurried afternoon, a book she had been saving, a moment of genuine rest. And she said something afterward that has remained with me as one of the most precise observations about this particular passage. She said that external validation lasts for minutes, but self-recognition persists for days. That is the essential shift Jung described as the movement from the dependent ego to the mature self, the genuine center of consciousness. Those who have arrived at living from the self do not act in order to earn praise. They act because action is the expression of who they are. They do not require an audience in order to know their worth, because their sense of value no longer originates from applause. It originates from the frequency of their own interior truth. And that source, unlike any external source, is entirely within their authority to access and sustain. The fifth step is the capacity to rise quickly, to transform failure into the fuel that carries you forward rather than the weight that holds you in place. Even after you have developed genuine interior strength and cultivated real emotional independence, life will continue to make you fall, especially when no one is present to catch you. And those falls can feel, in the moment of experiencing them, like evidence that everything you have built was constructed on unstable ground. You thought you had moved beyond a particular pattern, and then one small event, one careless word, one moment of unexpected vulnerability shakes you in ways you did not anticipate. The shame that follows can be acute, and in that exposed and solitary moment, the temptation to retreat, to return to the accommodating and pleasing version of yourself that once guaranteed a degree of acceptance, can feel almost irresistible. But Jung taught with consistent emphasis that those falls do not arrive to dismantle you. They arrive to illuminate you, to reveal the specific territories within you that remain unintegrated, the parts of your interior landscape that are still waiting for your honest attention and your unconditional acknowledgement. Every time you fall, the shadow resurfaces. And that resurfacing is not punishment. It is illumination. It directs the light of your awareness toward precisely what still needs to be seen. The hidden arrogance, the unnamed fear, the hunger for approval that you believed you had already resolved. And the moment you rise again, without waiting for applause, without requiring someone else's support to restore your momentum, the self expands. You become, through that specific act of rising alone, something measurably more than you were before you fell. There was a woman who had invested years of sustained effort into building a small business from genuinely modest beginnings. The work was slow and the progress was incremental, but it was real and it was hers. And then the person she had trusted most within that enterprise betrayed her in a way that dismantled what she had built almost entirely. The months that followed were characterized by guilt and fear and a particular kind of grief that comes from losing something you constructed with your own hands. But her therapist asked her a question that altered the entire trajectory of her recovery. If this is not an ending but a lesson, what exactly is it teaching you? She sat with the question in silence for a long moment, and then she said, quietly and with evident recognition, "Perhaps I was never truly listening to my own instincts." From that single honest answer, everything began to change direction. The sixth step asks you to act without waiting for inspiration, to develop will as something distinct from and more durable than emotion. Because if solitude was the forge in which your strength was shaped, then discipline is the process through which that strength becomes genuinely functional. Jung wrote that will is the energy capable of reorganizing the entire psyche. It is not merely the force required to take action. It is the power to move beyond the fluctuations of momentary feeling in service of something that carries lasting meaning. When you act only when inspiration arrives, only when the emotional conditions feel sufficiently favorable, your ego remains in control. The part of you that perpetually seeks comfort continues to determine what is possible. But when you act beyond the reach of feeling, when you take the next necessary step, regardless of whether you feel ready or motivated or sufficiently supported, you are no longer governed by mood. You have submitted to a higher ordering principle. The order of the self, where action flows from genuine purpose rather than from the convenience of favorable emotion. There was a woman raising a child alone while managing two demanding jobs simultaneously. She described a period of complete depletion, a stretch of time when the passion that had once sustained her had simply gone quiet. Everything she did felt mechanical,